Indigo light washed over the Galactic Defense Academy like auroral waves across a night sky. The massive crystalline spires rose above the parade grounds, refracting the light of the twin suns into prismatic patterns that danced across the assembled cadets. Commander Valeria's voice cut through the ceremonial atmosphere. Final pairing assignments will determine your future in the Corps. Your partner will be your lifeline, your balance, your other half in combat. Tessa Novari stood at rigid attention, her cobalt skin shimmering with the iridescent markings that identified her as royalty among the Meridians. At 22 standard cycles, she had already distinguished herself as the top tactical strategist in her class. Her uniform bore the insignia of 6 combat specializations, more than any other cadet in Academy history. Cadet Novari, the commander's voice echoed across the grounds. Step forward for your partner assignment. Tessa advanced with measured steps, chin high, golden eyes scanning the remaining unassigned cadets. She expected to be paired with one of the Draconian cadets, whose natural armor and thermal abilities would complement her tactical mind and enhanced reflexes. Instead, Commander Valeria gestured to a figure standing apart from the others. Cadet Novari, meet Cadet Reed. The human male was shorter than Tessa by nearly 20 centimeters. His skin was tanned but unmarked by any technological enhancements. Where other cadets bore the distinctive bulges of subcutaneous armor or the shimmer of neural implants, this human appeared completely unaugmented. Most shocking of all was the weapon strapped to his back, not a plasma rifle or quantum disruptor, but a primitive bow made of carbon fiber and what appeared to be actual wood. Whispers rippled through the assembly. Tessa heard the barely concealed laughter, the shocked exclamations in a dozen different languages. "This is inappropriate," Tessa said, her voice carrying across the parade ground. Humans lack the genetic modifications and technological integration necessary for frontline operations. The human Darien Red, according to his identification badge, said nothing. His gray eyes, the color of storm clouds over Meridian Prime, simply observed her with unsettling calmness. Commander Valeria's expression hardened. "The pairings are final, Cadet. Report to Simulation Zone 12 for your assessment mission." Tessa felt heat rise in her face, a rare break in her composure. Gaze flicked to the observation platform where her mother, Admiral Novari, watched with an unreadable expression. Being paired with a primitive would reflect poorly on her family's standing in the Corps. As they walked toward the simulation chambers, Tessa maintained a careful distance from the human. "What exactly do you expect to contribute with that?" she asked, nodding toward his bow. Darien checked the string with practiced fingers. "Whatever is necessary," he replied, his voice unexpectedly deep. The simulation chamber doors slid open, revealing a sterile white room that would soon transform into their testing environment. "This is a tactical combat exercise," Tessa explained, unsure if the human even understood. "The simulation will generate adaptive threats." That the chamber light suddenly pulsed red. An alarm blared, cutting off her words. "System breach detected," an automated voice announced. "Security protocols failing. Simulation parameters corrupted." The white walls around them flickered, then resolved into the ruins of a city, but something was wrong. The air carried the acrid smell of real smoke, not the sanitized simulation version. The ground trembled beneath actual explosions. "This isn't a simulation anymore," Darien said, already moving, bow in hand. An arrow knocked but not drawn. A plasma bolt sizzled through the air where they had been standing moments before, scorching the concrete to glass. Tessa's hand went to her sidearm. Training taking over. Possible. The safety systems, her words died as a combat drone burst through a nearby wall, weapons systems online and targeting. Before she could raise her weapon, Darien's bow sang. The arrow struck the drone's primary sensor array with impossible precision, sending it careening into a wall as the machine crashed to the ground. Sparking and disabled, Darien was already moving toward cover, another arrow ready. "We need to move," he said, those storm gray eyes now scanning the environment with the practiced efficiency of a veteran soldier. "This isn't training anymore. This is survival." For the first time in her life, Tessa Novari found herself at a loss for words, following the lead of someone she had dismissed as primitive only moments before. Tessa ducked as another explosion rocked the ruins around them. The simulation zone had transformed into a hellscape of broken concrete and twisted metal. Real dust filled her lungs, and the heat from plasma fire singed her uniform as they sprinted. Between cover points. "This makes no sense," she hissed, checking the charge on her sidearm. "The Academy's failsafes should have prevented this." Darian moved beside her with surprising silence for someone without enhanced reflexes. "Someone wanted this to happen," he replied, eyes constantly scanning their surroundings. "The question is who?"
Ow.
A mechanical whine pierced the air. 3 combat drones hovered into view, their weapon systems already locking onto their position. Tessa raised her plasma pistol, targeting the lead drone, but before she could fire, Darian's bow twanged 3 times in rapid succession. 3 arrows found 3 sensor arrays with impossible precision. The drones faltered, their targeting systems compromised, giving Tessa the opportunity to finish them with well-placed shots. "How did you do that?" she demanded as they moved again, keeping to the shadows of a collapsed building. "Practice," he answered simply. "Humans adapt." Through the simulation's emergency broadcast system, they could hear the screams and weapons fire of other cadets scattered throughout the zone. This wasn't isolated. The entire training facility had been compromised. "Need transport," Darian said, studying the tactical map that still functioned on Tessa's wrist device. "The communications hub is 4 kilometers east. If we can reach it, we might be able to call for extraction." They found their opportunity in an underground maintenance bay, a military scout bike. Its sleek purple hull scratched but functional. Tessa activated its systems with a touch, familiar with the Meridian design. "Can you drive?" Darian asked, already checking the bike's weapon mounts. "I've been piloting since before I could walk," she replied. Swinging onto the seat, Darian climbed onto the rear position, his bow ready for quick deployment. "Then let's move." The bike roared through the ruined cityscape, Tessa navigating debris, fields with expert precision while Darian provided covering fire. His arrows seemed to find targets that should have been impossible to hit from a moving platform, disabling pursuit vehicles, neutralizing sniper positions, all with a primitive weapon that somehow outperformed the most advanced targeting systems. They were halfway to the communications hub when they encountered the blockade, a wall of combat vehicles arranged across their path, manned by figures in Academy uniforms. "Those are cadets," Tessa whispered in disbelief as they observed from cover. "Why would they? ... Not everyone sees the Academy the same way," Darian replied, his voice tinged with something Tessa couldn't identify. "For some, this chaos is opportunity." Plan formed between them without words. Tessa modified the bike's power core to create a diversion, while Darian found a path around the blockade. When the modified core detonated in a brilliant flash of purple energy, they were already moving through maintenance tunnels beneath the city ruins. As they emerged on the other side, an armored vehicle detected them, its main cannon swiveling in their direction. Tessa gunned the engine, but knew they couldn't outrun the coming blast. Dorn stood on the back of the bike, balancing perfectly despite their speed. His bow bent, arrow drawn to his cheek. He released, and the arrow struck the vehicle's ammunition feed with surgical precision. The resulting explosion consumed the vehicle in a ball of flame. When they finally reached the communications hub, they found it damaged but functional. As Tessa worked to establish contact with Academy Command, Darian stood guard, his remaining arrows carefully rationed. "Who are you really?" she asked, fingers flying over the communications array. "No untrained human moves like you do." Darian's eyes never stopped scanning the perimeter. "Who says I'm untrained?" Before she could press further, the communications system crackled to life. But instead of the Academy command channel, they heard an encrypted frequency and a voice. That made Darian freeze. "Infiltration successful," the voice reported. "Operation Purge proceeding as planned. All primitive species cadets to be eliminated in the malfunction." Tessa's golden eyes met Darian's storm gray ones in shared understanding. This was no accident. It was genocide disguised as a training accident. Night fell over the simulation zone, the artificial environment perfectly mimicking the cold and darkness of a real urban battlefield. Tessa and Darian had taken refuge in what remained of a medical facility, the communications hub having been destroyed by an orbital strike minutes after they'd intercepted the transmission. "They're targeting nano-mented species," Tessa said, applying a medical patch to a gash on her arm. "But why?" "The Galactic Defense Corps has always prided itself on diversity." Darian sat across from her, methodically checking each of his remaining arrows. His movements were precise, ritualistic almost. "Pride and practice are different things," he said quietly. "How many humans have reached command rank in the Corps?" Tessa opened her mouth to answer, then closed it. She couldn't name one exactly. Darian said, meeting her gaze. "We're tolerated, not accepted. Used as frontline fodder, not leaders." "That doesn't explain this," she countered. Gesturing to the chaos beyond their temporary shelter, Darian set his bow aside and pulled up his sleeve, revealing a forearm unmarked by technology, but covered in scars, deliberate, surgical scars. "Humans aren't primitive by choice, Tessa. We're primitive by necessity." The revelation hit her like a physical blow. "What do you mean?" 3 generations ago, humans were as augmented as any species in the galaxy. Neural implants, genetic modifications, technological integration, we embraced it all. His eyes grew distant. Then came the cascade failure. A solar flare triggered a chain reaction in the implant network. Billions died in seconds as their own augmentations turned against them. Tessa's breath caught. Oh, the Great Darkness. "I learned about it in history, but the records said it was a terrorist attack." "History is written by the survivors with the most power," Darian replied bitterly. "The survivors were those who had rejected augmentation or lived in shielded environments. We rebuilt, but with a solemn vow. Never again would we put technology inside our bodies." She studied him with new eyes. "So the vow is the result of centuries of refinement. When you can't integrate with your weapons, you perfect them externally." He demonstrated by drawing an arrow with fluid precision. "No targeting computer can match 20 years of daily practice." A distant explosion illuminated his face, highlighting cheekbones and jaw that Tessa suddenly realized were aesthetically pleasing by Meridian standards. She pushed the inappropriate thought aside. Academy knew this. Some did. Others saw us as primitives to be pitied or eliminated. He reattached his quiver. "I think someone decided to use this training exercise as cover for a purge." Their eyes met in the darkness, a new understanding forming between them. Their backgrounds couldn't have been more different. She, born to privilege, trained in the finest academies. He forged through hardship, carrying the weight of his species' tragic history. "We need to reach the central control hub," Tessa said, pulling up a map on her tactical display. "From there, we can broadcast what we've learned to the entire Corps." Darian nodded, but his hand unexpectedly covered hers where it rested on the display. The warmth of skin-to-skin contact rare, in a world of technological interfaces, sent an unfamiliar sensation up her arm. "We'll need to trust each other completely," he said, voice low. "No more Meridian and human, just you and me." The intensity in his gray eyes made her heart rate accelerate in a way combat never had. "You and me," she agreed, suddenly aware of how close they were sitting. The moment was broken by the sound of approaching vehicles. They moved as one, gathering their equipment with practiced efficiency. But something had changed between them, a connection forged in danger, an understanding that transcended their different worlds as they slipped into the night. Tessa realized, with startling clarity, that she would trust this human with her life. More surprisingly, she was beginning to care whether he lived or died for reasons that had nothing to do with their mission. Dawn broke over the simulation zone, the artificial light mimicking sunrise with eerie perfection. Tessa and Darian had made it halfway to the central control hub when they encountered the rebel cadets, a mixed group of species all wearing academy uniforms modified with a silver insignia. Meridian royalty, their leader sneered, a Salatian with glistening scales and sharp teeth, and a human with a stick. How pathetic. They were surrounded, a dozen weapons trained on them. Darian's quiver was nearly empty, and Tessa's sidearm was running dangerously low on charge. "Commander Vex sends his regards," the Salatian continued. He said you might have intercepted some sensitive communications. Commander Vex was her mother's direct superior, one of the highest-ranking officers in the Corps. Vex is behind this. The rebel laughed, a gurgling sound through his aquatic breathing apparatus. The entire High Command is behind this. Operation Purge has been planned for years. It's the perfect way to cleanse the Corps of undesirables while blaming it on a system malfunction. Undesirables, Darien repeated, his voice dangerously quiet. You mean non-omented species? Those? Who sympathize with them? The Salation gestured at Tessa. Like certain Meridian families who argued for more human inclusion, ice formed in Tessa's stomach. Her mother had been advocating for expanded human representation in the Corps for years. This wasn't just about eliminating humans. It was a political purge. They were disarmed and marched to a makeshift holding facility where others captured. Cadets huddled in fear, primarily humans and other species, with minimal technological enhancement. My father died trying to warn people about this, a female cadet whispered to them, her features marking her as Terran like Darien. He discovered files about Operation Purge in the Corps' archives. They said his shuttle accident was a malfunction. 2 hours passed in tense silence. Guards changed shifts. Tessa worked methodically at the restraints binding her wrists, making incremental progress without drawing attention. If we get out of here, she murmured to Darien, their shoulders touching as they sat side by side. What will you do? His storm-gray eyes met hers. Finish what we started. The truth needs to be told, even if it destroys the Corps, especially. Then, something better needs to be built from the ashes. Their whispered conversation was interrupted by a commotion at the entrance. The door slid open to reveal a familiar figure, Commander Valeria, her uniform torn and bloodied, but her bearing still authoritative. I'm getting you out, she said tersely, disabling the guards with precise strikes. Not all of High Command is corrupt. Some of us remember what the Corps is supposed to stand for. As they fled through maintenance tunnels, Valeria explained that a faction of officers loyal to the original mission of the Corps was fighting back against Operation Purge, but were outnumbered and outgunned. Need proof to take to the Galactic Council. The Central Control Hub, Tessa and Darien said simultaneously. It's where all simulation data is stored, Tessa continued, including command overrides and communications. It's also heavily guarded, Valeria warned. The rebel cadets have fortified it under Vex's orders. In an abandoned armory, they resupplied. Tessa found a full-charge power pack for her sidearm, while Darien discovered a quiver of specialized arrows armor-piercing, explosive-tipped, and sonic dessers or celt. As they prepared for the assault, Darien pulled Tessa aside. If we don't make it through this, ... She pressed a finger to his lips, surprising herself with the boldness of the gesture. We will. Their eyes held for a long moment, volumes passing between them without words. Then, with natural synchronicity, they moved closer, the distance between them disappearing until their lips met. The kiss was brief, but intense. A promise. And a revelation. When they separated, Tessa saw her own wonder reflected in Darien's eyes. Whatever happened next, something fundamental had changed between them, manned within her. Ready? Commander Valeria called, unaware of the moment she had. Interrupted. They nodded, moving into formation with the other freed cadets. The assault on the Central Control Hub would begin at nightfall. As darkness fell, Tessa found herself watching Darien prepare his bow with the same meticulous care she had once dismissed as primitive. Now she recognized it for what it was. Connection to something essential that her technologically advanced society had forgotten, the power of the human element. Unaugmented and uncompromised. For what it's worth, she said quietly, I was wrong about you, about humans. Darien's smile transformed his face, making her heart skip in a way no battle ever had. Prove it by surviving the night, he replied. I think I'd like to kiss you again, under less desperate circumstances. The Central Control Hub rose before them like a techno-organic cathedral, its surfaces pulsing with light and information. Rebel forces had fortified every entrance, and orbital defense cannons had been positioned on the roof no longer simulated, but real, deadly, and aimed at the Academy's main buildings. This is Commander Vex's endgame, Valeria explained as they observed from cover. When the cannons fire, they'll destroy the Academy's command center, killing the leadership who opposed Operation Purge. The official report will blame a catastrophic system failure. Their plan was risky, but straightforward. Valeria would lead a diversionary attack with the freed cadets, while Tessa and Darian infiltrated the hub through maintenance shafts to reach the control center. As final preparations were made, Tessa found a moment alone with Darian. "When this is over," she said, "there's something I want to show you on Meridian Prime. My family has a sanctuary in the northern mountains. The sunrise there turns the crystals in the cliffs to fire." Darian's hand found hers, fingers intertwining. "I'd like that." The attack began with precision. A plasma fire and explosions drew attention to the main entrance. Tessa and Darian slipped into a narrow maintenance shaft barely large enough for them to crawl through. "So much for royal dignity," Tessa muttered as they inched forward through dust and cobwebs. "I don't know," Darian replied, his voice light despite the tension. "You make crawling through a filthy tunnel look graceful." They emerged into a service corridor, dispatching to guards with synchronized efficiency before they could raise an alarm. Moving through the hub, they encountered resistance, but worked in perfect tandem, her technological expertise complementing his instinctive precision. When they reached the central control room, they found it guarded by Commander Vex himself, flanked by elite security officers. The Meridian Princess and her pet human, Vex sneered, his cybernetically enhanced eyes glowing with malice. "Ow! Fitting that you should witness the dawn of a new era for the cores purified of primitive influences." "You mean purged of those who disagree with you?" Tessa replied, her weapon raised. Vex laughed. "Your mother was the same idealistic too. The point of blindness. The galaxy belongs to the enhanced, the evolved. The rest are evolutionary dead ends." The fight that followed was brutal and swift. Vex's augmentations made him formidable, but they also made him predictable, reliant on technology rather than instinct. Darian's arrows found gaps in his defenses that no targeting system could have anticipated, while Tessa's intimate knowledge of Meridian combat systems allowed her to counter his attacks. When it ended, Vex lay defeated, his enhancements shorting out from a precisely placed arrow through his control implant. "Technology isn't evolution," Darian said, standing over him. "Adaptation is." Tessa accessed the control systems, uploading the evidence of Operation Purge to every communication channel in the cores. The truth couldn't be contained now. Outside, the battle turned as loyal Academy forces, now aware of the conspiracy, joined Commander Valerius' fighters. The simulation zone's systems were gradually brought back under control, safety protocols re-established. In the aftermath, as medical teams tended to the wounded and security forces rounded up the conspirators, Tessa found Darian on an observation platform, watching the artificial dawn break over the simulation zone. "What happens now?" he asked, as she joined him. "Reform," she replied. "My mother and the other loyal commanders are already calling for a complete reorganization of the cores, integration protocols that respect all species choices regarding augmentation, a new beginning." Darian turned to her, those storm-gray eyes now holding something warmer than the tactical focus she'd first seen in them. "And us?" Tessa moved closer, her royal reserve giving way to something more honest. "It depends. Are you still interested in seeing Meridian sunrises?" His answer came not in words but in action, pulling her close and kissing her with an intensity that made her previous life seem colorless by comparison. When they finally separated, both slightly breathless, the artificial sun had fully risen, bathing them in golden light. "I've been assigned as diplomatic liaison to the Meridian homeworld," he said, his forehead resting against hers. "Something about improving cross-species understanding." Tessa laughed, the sound bright and genuine. "How convenient." 3 months later, as they stood together on her family's mountain sanctuary watching actual crystal cliffs catch fire with the light of a true sunrise, Tessa reflected on how completely her understanding of strength had changed. True power wasn't in technology or augmentation, but in the connections between people, different but complementary, each with strengths the other lacked. As Darian's hand found hers, warm and real and unaugmented, She knew she wouldn't have it any other way.